and welcome everyone. Next up, I'm going to, Bruce, if you'll introduce yourself and then I'll have you introduce Tina.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bruce Turkel. I create messaging strategy and brand strategy for individuals and corporations. I have actually spoken for your organization. My friend Sue Romanos invited me a few years ago and I had a great time, but I'm even more honored to be here today because I'm getting to introduce my friend, Tina Brown. And Tina is just a powerhouse. Those of you who already know her from this organization know how amazing she is, but more importantly, you know about the good work she does. And I don't want to get in the way of anything she has to tell you, only to tell you how thrilled I am to be here with her. And in the grid, I'm sitting right next to her, so that makes me happy.
I'm on top of you, Bruce.
Always.
Great, Bruce. Is there anything else you want to tell us about yourself? So the one group's going to get to know you in a breakout at least. Better.
Well, the exciting thing that I have going on right now is that I have just gotten an approval on my proposal for my new book. It's my 7th book. It is not on branding and marketing because I wrote 6 of those and I had had enough. And my publisher wanted it. It's on what people our age, and by our age, I say 35 to 65-ish, do when we've reached some level of relative success and then want to change our lives. When I started writing it a couple of years ago, because everyone I knew was talking about it, my publisher and my agent were not that interested in it, unfortunately. But in the last 3 months, everybody has had to change their life, so much so that you even said you're not going to use the word pivot anymore because it's becoming so overused. So all of a sudden, my agent was thrilled about the fact that I had a book that I had interviewed 28 people who had all changed their lives, some for good reasons, some for bad reasons. And then how did they create success? How did they create happiness? How did they create fulfillment? So that's what I've been working on, and I'm actually absolutely thrilled by it. Thank you for letting me explain that.
We can't wait to read your book, Bruce.
I will come back and share it with all of you when it comes out.
Great. And I think you're going to introduce Tina for us. Oh, you did. Tina. Tina needs no introduction, actually.
No,
everybody in this entire community knows who Tina is.
Hi. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Hi, my name is Tina Brown. I'm the CEO of the Overtown Youth Center. And I totally agree with Lori that the climate in which we're living in is one that is very emotional for all of us. Today, we've come together to really explore a very heavy topic, and that is, we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So Lori, I thank you. I thank all of you ladies for taking the time out of your busy schedules this morning. And today I am simply here to share and to enlighten each of you on discovering ways of being comfortable being uncomfortable. I want to start with telling you a few stories. I'm delighted to be amongst a group of women who are all professionals. We've all worked very hard to achieve some level of successes based on all of your introductions. I'm assuming we've all gone to a 4-year institution. I myself, I earned my bachelor's degree in accounting and then later earned my master's degree in accounting. Years later, I'm now a nonprofit executive. But as I reflect back on when I first started my career in accounting, as a young Black girl entering into the field of accounting, which is a predominantly white industry, which is a predominantly male-dominated industry, I found myself working really, really hard. Oftentimes, I found myself training senior staff or staff that were excelling into management positions. And for me, I had really accomplished a lot. The first in my family to graduate from college or from high school. And I really didn't find a problem with working hard. I didn't have a problem with training individuals. But it wasn't until years later that I saw my fellow colleagues who were advancing farther, faster than I was. And it began to dawn on me that what is it? Was it because I was a Black girl that I had to continuously prove myself before I was promoted, before I earned a salary that I deserved? We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I know for a fact that even as a nonprofit executive today, I earn less than my white counterparts. So much so that statistics show that Black women earn 38% less than white men. And to unpack that a little further, Black women typically earn 21% less than the white professional. Again, I'm grateful for my TCI group because it was only a year ago that one of my TCI forum members began to have a conversation around pay equity. And she and her husband went on a limb and they started to do their own research. And they pulled the executive salaries of nonprofit executives in Miami. And she was almost in tears coming back to report to our group that Tina, Celia, Michelle, who's on this call today, you guys earn way less than any other executive in our group, and you are in the lowest percentile of earning executive pay in Miami. And from there, we all set out on a mission to approach our employers for equitable pay, for the pay that we deserve. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm gonna stop there because I want this to be a really interactive conversation. And I want us to challenge ourselves or share experiences or share moments where you have felt uncomfortable. When thinking about my story and thinking about the organizations that you work in, think about those Black men and Black women who may be earning on average 38% of your 38% less than your counterparts. So, can we hear from a few of you on this call? Because this is a TCI Talk, and it is not about what I have to say only. It is about how do we change the trajectory of our future as women in leadership and as men in leadership, Bob. How do we do this together? Anyone?
Now, I know we have some people on this call that are not shy.
It's okay.
Well, I am not shy. The longer you get to know me, the better you get to know me, the more you'll learn that I'm never afraid to open my big mouth. I'm not in the same position. I'm a white male. I've done very well career-wise, compensation-wise. And I think to get to the tagline, despite that, I am uncomfortable about 99% of what goes on these days. I'm uncomfortable with our situation vis-a-vis racism. I'm uncomfortable with our situation vis-a-vis pay equity. As Lori knows, the biggest chunk of my career was spent reporting to a female, which for a man of my generation is extremely rare. So I have a somewhat different take on women in the workplace than most of my age contemporaries. You know, I've done a fair amount of reading, not enough, never enough, but I've done a fair amount of reading about the Black and the female experience in our country. And I think the thing that makes me most uncomfortable, aside from injustice, which is, again, a huge issue on so many levels, is that no matter how much I read, no matter how much I talk to people in different walks of life, it is impossible for me to understand what it's like to walk in those shoes. My heart breaks constantly these days, but you know, I love the title of the presentation because I feel that that's my life story these days. And I say that despite a very successful career, loving what I do, loving where I do it, and all that goes with that. It's just a really tough time. And it's not, I don't think it's going to get better anytime quickly. So.
Thank you, Bob, so much for sharing. I know it's tough, but that was great, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to add a couple things. So first, Tina, thank you for sharing the statistical information. Unfortunately, it's not shocking. I don't think I ever really saw it defined between, you know, Black and white, but, you know, being familiar with the overall women versus men kind of pay inequity. Unfortunately, the statistics aren't shocking. I would say it's you know, the first step is it's great that you have that data, because having data is, you know, is very important to be able to start some kind of change based on facts. And just recently, the other day, I don't know what I was reading, but I was reading something related to racial inequality and change and things like that. And what stuck out to me was it said, you know, the first step to change is saying the word no. And I don't have the complete answer, but just what you've talked about so far and thinking about it in these last couple of moments, you know, a combination of the, you know, pure data that you have and implementing the word no could be a start to change, perhaps.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. I think there was someone else that was about to speak. Maureen.
Maureen, yes. Thank you, Tina. I do love the topic. To be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think every one of us can relate to the fact that we are distressed and uncomfortable with what's happening. And I think our first step is exactly what we're doing today, the conversation. Our team, our company is joining in the 21-day challenge because we can't stand by and do nothing. Every little part will help us move forward. So the conversation is the first step.
Thank you, Maureen. So I'm gonna stop there. I know a lot of us may have a lot to say, and we definitely don't want to rush this conversation. I know that we are on a time frame. However, I want to leave in sharing that one. As executive.
Hold on a second, Tina. I hear a lot of background noise. Make sure if you're not speaking that you're on mute. Great.
Hello, this is Dr. Bessman, and I've just joined you. I've joined earlier, but I did not speak up at the time. I was on another phone, but I heard what Tina had to say. I'm the CEO of New Horizons Community Mental Center, and I have to join in with her as confirmation. I've been CEO for close to 40 years, and I have been always at the low end of the dealing with pay equity, and my colleagues have said that to me, you know, who are white males predominantly. And in just a recent meeting with one of the top lobbyists in Florida, and he was talking about the salaries, and when he heard mine, he broke into tears and said that he could not believe that that a CEO of a nonprofit is making what I am making. So I join in with Tina, and, you know, great confirmation of that is our typical experience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stetson, for sharing. So again, I want to leave you with a couple of points on this story. Number one, now is not the time to. We should not accept discriminatory practices in the workplace. We must speak up and speak out for our colleagues, especially our Black colleagues. Statistics also show that women, Black women in particular, are 80% the breadwinners. Over 80% of Black women are the breadwinners of their families. So pay equity has all sorts of implications, as there are many Black women being the breadwinners of their families and trying to raise their kids. The other thing is that, just as I mentioned my TCI story, as women in leadership, we must empower, coach, and help our Black brothers and sisters advocate and negotiate for themselves. Y'all help a sister out, okay? So I'm gonna go on to another story. And again, these stories are really to illustrate and unpack why it is important to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I could only assume that many of us are mothers on this call. Many of us have children. And as mothers, our primary goal is to love our babies and protect our children. Once we have kids, that's all we know. I am a mother of 3 Black sons. 1 13, 1 9, and 1 7. And for those of you who have multiple children, for some reason, it always seems like that last one is the one that gives you a run for your money. And my son, Caden, who's 7, he is rambunctious. He loves the great outdoors. He loves sports. He loves swimming. He loves to just be out and about. So much so that and he just likes to run away, you know, like, Mom, I'm going outside. I want to play. I need to play. I need to get out of here. So much so that I remember when he was 2, we were at a party, and I was just telling a friend of mine, we were just talking the other day, and he was like, I remember you because your son ran away from the party to the other side of the park. And I'm like, yeah, that's him. And he's still running today. Well, guess what? He has a best friend now. And his best friend, his name is Xavier. And Xavier is a white boy. And they're like 2 peas in a pod. Every morning, I get a knock at my door, 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh no, Xavier, it's too early. Please, Xavier. And Caden's like, that's Xavier, that's Xavier. He's super excited. Okay, Mom, can I go outside? Sure. Especially now that we're all working and buried in emails and Zoom calls and conferences. Sure, go, bye. So a few weeks ago, Caden and Xavier left home, and I had a really packed schedule that day. And it wasn't until a few hours later that I looked up that no Caden. And so I walked out of my office, I go into the living room, and I asked my other 2 sons, where's Caden? I don't know. They're all on PlayStation or doing whatever. I don't know. I'm like, come on, guys, you know that I'm working. You gotta keep up with your brother. I'm like, forget it. I go outside, I look to the east, I look to the west, no Caden. I walk down the street and I find Xavier and Caden in the schoolyard on the basketball court playing basketball. But something didn't seem right. I'm like, how in the hell did they get in that locked gate? And it dawned on me that they jumped the gate to go play basketball. And I'm sitting like, oh my God, they really wanted to play basketball that bad on the basketball court? Caden, get your butt out of there. I immediately screamed. Xavier, get your buns out of there. let's go home. But an overwhelming level of anxiety hit me in that moment. As I began to think about what recently happened to George Floyd, I thought about what happened to Trayvon Martin and others that were murdered primarily because of the color of their skin. So as Caden, I walked Xavier to his door, and then I walked my son home to our house. And I immediately started to bawl inside because I knew that it was time for me to have a very uncomfortable conversation with my 7-year-old son. I took him in the bathroom and I said, look in the mirror. What is the difference between you and Xavier? I don't know, Mom. He's like, we were just playing basketball. And I'm like, Xavier is white and you are black. And if a police had rolled up on you and Xavier that day, you guys had jumped the fence of a school that was locked. Number one, that's called trespassing. But I'm not sure, with all of the recent events, that you and Xavier would have been treated the same. And what is happening in America is that Black boys and Black men are being unjustly, unfairly treated. We've seen it. Many have died at the hands of a police officer. And all I can think about is the movie of Central Park 5. And then I thought about hearing George Floyd on the ground screaming, Mama, a grown man. And as a Black mom, and I'm sure I can speak for all of the Black mothers on this call, our worst fear is losing our children. How do we make a change? How do we begin to have very uncomfortable conversations? And after that, I saw this somber look on my son's face, and it hurt me to my heart to have that conversation. But the conversation wasn't over. I said, go back and play now. But I took a walk to Xavier's mom's house. Denise is my white friend. We barbecue together. We have drinks together. We get our feet done together. And in that moment, I knew that it was time for me to have an uncomfortable conversation with her. I had to say, Denise, Xavier and Caden was in the schoolyard playing basketball. And that's not a problem. The problem is they jumped the fence. I need you as my friend to help me to keep my son alive, to help me to protect my son by talking to your son about racism, about racial inequalities, and racial injustices. Because I know that they're going to be best friends for life. But Xavier needs to know that Caden is a Black friend, and he's going to have to protect him one day. And he's going to have to make decisions that will not put his best friend's life in jeopardy. Not that I blamed Xavier, and vice versa. They're gonna have to look out for each other. But the truth of the matter is, Xavier is gonna have to make decisions that will one day protect my son. I know that was a heavy story, but I'm looking for each of you, or a few of you, to share your thoughts, to share how possible that we may be able to change what we're seeing in America today. Any thoughts? Rochelle.
I don't know that I have anything meaningful to contribute, but I wanted to say thank you, Tina, for sharing that story. That I'm not a mom, but just as a human, as a white human, that really is making me think, and I appreciate it. As you said, it wasn't an easy conversation for you to have, and I'm sure it wasn't easy to have to repeat it for us, but I'm sure I speak for many people when I say I really appreciate it. And I can say in general, in the last several weeks, I've been doing a lot of thinking about race and racial injustice and inequality here. And I know it's not the job of Black people to explain it to white people. But I feel extra grateful when people who've actually experienced racism directly and who have a little more experience with understanding its forms than I might do share their stories. So just thank you.
No, thank you, Rochelle, for sharing. And again, I know this is a heavy topic, and part of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, the beginning of it is us sharing and talking about what makes us uncomfortable. Anybody else? Lori.
Yeah, Tina, you know, I keep, and it's not the solution, it's just a part of it. I mean, clearly I'm white. I have 3 daughters, and we had conversations with them when they all started driving about if you get pulled over, because there are police officers on their power trips. They don't like, there are some that just don't like women or don't like anyone having any defensiveness in their voice or anything. And we had to teach them, or we taught them, if you get pulled over, your hands stay on the dash, you say nothing but yes sir, no sir, and you know, take your ticket and go on your way, and we'll take care of it later. You know, we're able to take care of it later. There are some people that aren't able to take care of it later. But I guess, you know, where I'm going is, how do we, in our community here, it's a bigger problem. You know where I'm going, it's police reform. And it's just one small part, but I think it's a step. I don't even know what we do as a community to really push that. You got to do it. You know, our community, government, elected officials, you know, where do you even start with that? And I have a feeling that you're probably involved in those conversations on police reform too.
Sure. So that was going to be something that I suggested as I told after that story. Number one, you know, again, talk to your kids about race. Have them watch documentaries that show racial injustices. I remember watching Central Park 5, and it was so emotional for me to watch 5 boys who had spent a tremendous amount of years in prison for being accused of raping a white woman. And when you look at that story, number one, these women, a lot of them weren't educated, some of them were. They didn't have the resources, they didn't have the networks to help them save their young boys from going to jail. And so to that point, I want to say, if you are in places of influence, use that influence, or if you are in spaces of influence, I think about my good friend Bruce here on the line, and when he called me a few weeks ago, he's like, "Hey Tina, how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm good." You know, I'm thinking it's just a normal call from Bruce. But what Bruce was
Tina, you're frozen.
Lost you, Tina. You lost your internet.
Yeah. So Bruce, if you know the story she's going with or where she's headed, we'll let you jump in while Tina comes back.
I do know the story because I was there. We had this issue happen a couple days ago with her internet freezing, so I'm sure she'll call right back on. But quite simply, when all of this started happening, I did call Tina to ask what I could do to help. And I think she was a little surprised simply because she thought I was just calling to chat, since we do that anyways. But I said, no, I'm calling to find out what I can do to help. And I know this is weird because usually I call because we're friends. You're black and I'm white, but I call because we're friends. Now I'm calling because you're black and I'm white, and I'm trying to figure out what I can do to help. Oh, there she is. Okay, she's back. I'm sorry, I was just filling in for you. You're muted, but.
You're muted.
Tina, I'll give it back to you.
Sorry, I lost my connection. I was hoping that wouldn't happen. You know, when you're like having to do something really important, everything goes wrong.
It always happens at the good part.
I checked my internet connection this last night. I had my husband make sure it was hardwired into the computer. I wasn't on Wi-Fi, and voila. So when Bruce called, I'm like, look, Bruce, you know, he knows that I work for the overtime user. I'm like, I don't need you to pass out another breakfast or lunch. What I really need, Bruce, is for you to use your God-given talent. I need you to use your platform to elevate issues around racial injustice. I need you to be my coach around giving great speeches, because I have 500 to 1,000 young people watching me give speeches on a regular basis. And when those young people see me, one day they're going to aspire to be the next Tina Brown. And we are going to forever change the future of our young Black children, because they will begin to tell their stories and articulate in a manner that gets their point across. That's what I need you to do, Bruce. And I say that to say, some of you are in places or spaces of influence. You have friends who are judges. You have friends who are in politics. Now is the time for you to call them and say, here's what I want to do. How can I be involved in changing the landscape of America by fighting for inequity and social justice? I challenge each of you to scroll down your Black books and begin to start making really important calls. And as you think about the upcoming elections, and you vet the candidates that you might be thinking of, make sure that those are candidates that will hold people accountable and that they will do the right thing for the sake of our future. Any questions? Any other comments?
Yeah. This is Bob. Tina, with all due respect to Bruce, you don't need any guidance on how to make speeches. That was a very painful discussion for you, I'm sure. It was very painful for us, for me at least. I'm sure for others. One of my Black female colleagues at Deloitte, somebody who I met like my first week there and of whom I've become quite fond, comes from a very comfortable middle-class family, Black middle-class family, but middle class. And we've talked about this probably ad nauseum, literally. But we were talking one time, she has a son who I think Clinton is now 5. and she was talking about what happened when she met the man who's now her husband. And they would go out on a date. He's black also. And they would go out on a date and they'd be walking down the street. And all of a sudden, RJ would cross to the other side of the street. And the first time it happened, she kind of blew it off. And little by little, she said, this guy is like weird. Like, what's going on with him? And he looked at her and he said, you don't understand. You're a black girl. You're not a black male. You don't understand. Oh. And she said that for her, it was, I'm being a little exaggerating now, but it was as much of a revelation as hearing your story is to an old white guy. And she now has a son, and she's agonizing over when she and her husband have to have that talk. That's a talk that a parent should never have to make to a child, ever. Something you said really banged me upside the head, which is that you had to have that talk with your son, and we have to have talks too. And we have to, the problem, one of the many problems, challenges with racism is that it's insidious and it's subtle. And we tend to blow things off because there's so much screwed up in our world right now that, we're sort of told don't sweat the small stuff, but you got to sweat the small stuff. And when you see even the most subtle or insidious form of racism, even in a casual comment that's probably not meant seriously, I think we have to have that uncomfortable talk too. It's not the same talk that you had with your son, but we got to confront it. And I think we've gone far too long. And my take on it is that over the course of my career and my life, things have gotten better. I'm a graduate of Brandeis from 1968. We did march. I have marched since, and I'm very proud of that. But that's not enough. The change that has happened is not enough, and we got to keep doing more. So I really thank you for galvanizing me, and I'm sure others as well.
No, thank you. And you're right. I've had conversations with my Black friends and my Black family and my Black colleagues, and I think that we are all of the same opinion that we won't see change unless everyone is actively participating in change. And it's going to take a group of white people. It's going to take a country of white people to help us. We can't do this by ourselves. On another note, as you mentioned, Bob, you said in any form, whether it's social settings, we cannot tolerate any form of racism or unconscious bias. And with that being said, I want to tell you a funny story, and I didn't plan to tell the story, but I feel like this is a story that you guys should hear. So I have a ton of white friends, and one of my white friends, his mother passed away. And, I love this guy. He's a friend, he's a supporter of our organization. And just like all of us, our friends, they have tragedies in their lives and we want to be there to support them. And I showed up to his mom's funeral and I took one of my colleagues with me. It was a really nice service in a Jewish synagogue. And I had never been in a Jewish synagogue before, never. And so it was an experience for me. And so as my friend began to talk about his mom, he told some beautiful stories and my heart is going out to him. And the funeral was packed. And he started to tell about her last days. And he started to say how these amazing Black women had taken care of his mom up until the very end. And he was forever indebted to them because he had never seen anyone care for someone who was not their loved one like the way that these women cared for his mom. And I'm sitting there like in tears, but out of my peripheral vision, The whole row is looking at me saying, thank you. And I'm like trying to figure out, why are they thanking me? Well, lo and behold, they thought I was the caretaker of his mom because I was the only Black person in the funeral. Me and my colleague. And we're looking and we're like, oh, shucks, they think we're the caretakers. And I'm like, oh my God, when this funeral is over, I'm gonna have to tell him, you need to expand your Black friend network because your whole funeral looked at me and came up to thank me in the end. And here I'm thinking, no way, they're not thinking that I'm the caretaker. I have on this beautiful Black dress. I had my little Tory Burch clutch. And I'm like, no way. But yes way. There's still some unconscious bias. And we must not tolerate it. And my friend was so upset. She was like, we're not the maids. We're not the this. We're not the. I'm like, it's okay. Because he mentioned some Black women, and we're the only Black women in the funeral. But that just goes to show you that even in the most subtle moments, people have unconscious bias. And I challenge each of you to check your unconscious bias. I'll tell you another quick little story. I went to the meat store the other day. It's a little farmer's market and they sell organic foods. My husband is an organic foodie. And I said, and it was Father's Day. And I said, yes, can I get a pound of the wild caught salmon? And he was a white guy, and he said, I must warn you that it's $38.99 a pound. And I looked at him and said, okay. And I thought, would you have said that same thing to a white person who walked in here? Was it just your assumption that I could not afford my husband's Father's Day meal at $38.99? It's just those little things. I wasn't gonna make us think about it. I was like, sure, it's okay. As a matter of fact, give me 2 pounds. And he looked at me like, yeah, give me 2 pounds. As a matter of fact, I want the wild caught salmon. I want the wild caught shrimp. And I want some organic chicken wings. And it was just in that moment, I'm like, we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. My final story. As I mentioned, I'm married and I have a husband. Many of you may be married. You may have a husband, you may have a wife, you may have a significant other. And my husband is a relatively strong Black man, relatively strong personality. He's very studious of racism and oppression. And for many years, we used to have these battles in the home. And he was always, Tina, you don't understand. You really don't understand. There is an attack on Blacks. We are at war. And I don't know how to, with a level of fear and anxiety. He would always say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to protect you guys fully. I don't know how to protect my sons. We are at war. He's a good guy. He's a fireman. He goes to work every day. Sometimes he doesn't sleep at night. I can hear it in his voice in the morning when he calls me. And my worst fear is my husband getting pulled over on the way in from work and not quite making it home. Because if pulled over, he will challenge an officer. especially if he's pulled over for no apparent reason. I'm not saying he'll be disrespectful, but he knows his rights. He studied his rights. And he knows that there's gonna come a time where he's gonna have a police encounter. But as he knows that, I also know that that police encounter can go either way. And it is my worst fear that one day, this man who reads every food label, who takes my kids camping once a month, twice a month, who takes them fishing, who takes them to the movies, who gets them out of my hair, may one day not make it home because of the color of his skin and because of his strong personality and because it is often perceived that Black men and Black women are angry. We've been through a lot. And my only challenge to each of you is to challenge the status quo. My request today is if you should see on your drive home a Black man or a Black boy pulled over by a white cop, caution, drive slow. And if it is on your heart to stop, you may be the saving grace for a Black boy or a Black man one day. Any thoughts? I know.
Wait, Tina, so if you pull over and stop, I guess I like, okay, what do I say? What do I do? Some, even that's more, when you're reaching out to your judges and elected officials, I like scripts. What is it that should be said? I'd love some guidance on that.
You know, Lori, I'm not gonna make up a script for you right now. I don't know. Whatever is on your heart to say to your judge, what are we doing about police brutality in this community? You know, how are we, how are cops being trained? You know, what is happening? What has happened since the murder of George Floyd? Has the culture of our, law enforcement department, has that changed? What does that look like now? What is being done? I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but whatever you are compelled to do or say, I don't think that silence is an option. I'm not telling you to just call randomly, but I am saying in your sphere of influences and in your circles of friends and family, have the discussion so that when they are going back into their leadership positions or making decisions, that they are making decisions based on something that you have said to them. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I challenge you to explore how to have the conversations. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
And even with judges, I was just thinking about the fact that African-American men are, and I know I read the statistic, I just watched Just Mercy, it was highly recommend, but incarcerated at tremendous rates higher than anyone else. And, that's something that directly, the judges are directly influencing, the incarceration. So that just, your comments just made me think about that, what you're even asking them, what percentages, who are you sending to jail, who to prison, those kinds of things.
Why are you sending them to prison?
Right.
Is it a kid's first offense? We all make mistakes. We made mistakes when we were younger, right? Just because I stole a piece of gum out of the store doesn't mean I should go to jail for it. Doesn't mean I should have a record for it. We've all made mistakes.
I think one thing we can do is start asking for information, like in our local I live in Boca Raton, go to the mayor of Boca Raton and say, what statistics do we have on the percentage of people who are being pulled over are black, white, whatever? What is our track record? What do you think I can do about it to help? I happen to think the mayor of Boca is a good man, so I think he'd take the question respectfully.
Or just coming from you, Bob, it may say, Mayor so-and-so, we got to stop this.
Yeah.
It just may be as simple as that. You don't have to, you don't have to be a scholar about the questions you ask. You can just simply say, guys, we got to stop this.
Yeah. Well, you're right.
To make a difference. You may need the data, you may not, but just hearing, maybe that mayor is thinking to himself, I don't know what to do, but hearing from his white friends to say, you have to do something. Your legacy has to be something that changes the landscape of how Black people are treated in your city.
I think also as, I'm just thinking, the foundation that's given to police officers to educate them as they go through their training, to listen to these stories, to listen to, other types of discriminations that, they're going to have to handle one day, and they have to be conscious of that. So revamping the training, adding to the training, how do we, I guess that comes from, the mayors, our attorneys, just really educating them. So, when they can think about it twice, 3 times, 4 times, and really catch themselves and catch each other. It's cops are being, seeing things happening, and they're afraid, they're scared, or they're just not doing anything. So thank you, Tina.
No, you're right, Gabby. Rochelle.
So I'd like to, I guess, propose an uncomfortable conversation that I am still trying to figure out how to navigate. But it happens for other reasons that I've done. I've read a lot of the research into unconscious bias, not just when it comes to race, but gender and lots of other ways. And the uncomfortable conversation I do think we need to have with ourselves and possibly challenge other people is when someone says to me, I don't see color, I don't see race, the reality is your brain does. Yes. And the first conversation is with yourself to say, okay, my brain sees that, I can't stop it. What can I consciously do to counter that unconscious bias? What assumptions is my brain making without my conscious consent? My brain is making assumptions. How can I disrupt those assumptions that my brain is making and make sure that they don't affect my actions? And then the really uncomfortable conversation is when someone else says that to you. And I think some of it is generational. I've had a lot of people who are maybe my age and older say to me, I don't see color, I don't see race, so I don't understand people who do. And the first step that I've kind of been able to make in that uncomfortable situation is to say, maybe that's true for you, but it's not true for most people. So other people certainly are reacting based on someone's color, just as they react based on someone's gender. And then to try to take that next step to say, like, I'm not saying you consciously aim to treat people who look different from you differently. I'm not saying that you consciously think that people whose skin looks one way are lesser or inferior, but your brain does stuff. It does it without you, like I said, without your conscious consent. So it's better to start from a point of sort of believing and understanding this is there. Now, what are you going to do about it? So that's the uncomfortable conversation that I've I guess encountered the most urgently, let's say. And it is uncomfortable, but I guess it start by having it with yourself.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think we all have to do some of that. You know, we have to have conversations with ourselves and really search our internal selves and determine where those biases lie, and then determine how we're going to break those barriers or those unconscious bias concerns or things down. You know, I think you're absolutely right. It starts with the individual. You know, when I think about my organization did a talk on Save Our Sons, and someone mentioned, well, you know, you have, and I think Lori or someone mentioned, you know, this is how you have to explain to your kids when they're getting pulled over, right? So of course we all know it. You know, you pull over, you're very respectful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. You know, put your hands out so that they can see them. I mean, that's just standard, right? As a white person, you would teach your son that. As a Black person, I would teach my son that. But there's a difference, okay? Mm-hmm. Just like you said, Rochelle, the minute my Black son is pulled over, there is something that happens in the mind of the police officer that automatically assumes that Black person is guilty. And it could be based on the Black person having a hoodie on, could be based on that person having gold teeth. It could be whatever, right? But there is no reason to assume based on the way someone looks or the color of their skin that they are guilty. There's no reason for that. They should receive the same treatment as anyone else. When you are, as executives, interviewing for positions, when you sit down to interview, you should see qualifications. You should not see Tina Brown, who walked in the interview with braids, because culturally, Black people wear braids. And today, we've been able to break down some of those barriers. And so braids are accepted. Don't judge me because I have braids. Judge me based on my resume. Pay me for my value. Pay me according to my level of experience. Don't shortchange me because you think that you could, because I'm not gonna argue with what you're offering me. And maybe I won't, because culturally, Black people are very submissive. We've been taught that. We've been taught to comply for years, from the days of slavery. We don't want to ruffle the feathers. We don't want to be assumed to be greedy. We want to be modest, because most of us are modest and we come from very humble beginnings. Like me, I would have never challenged if my employer said, hey, I'm offering you $10 an hour. Yes, $10 an hour is more than anybody in my family has ever made. But is $10 an hour the value of the position that you're asking me to do, or the role and the responsibilities that you're asking me to do? No, I may accept it, but you should not offer, based on the color of my skin, a lesser salary for doing the same job as someone white with the same qualifications. Again, I challenge you to start in your organizations, ask the questions about diversity and inclusion, ask questions around pay equity, and make decisions absent of color.
Tina, a couple of things I put a link on the Harvard bias test that anyone can take. It's a free test. Mm-hmm. And people that think they're super enlightened are really surprised when they take this. People of all races, when they take that test, to find out that, you know, they really do have implicit or unconscious bias. And I wanted to share, you know, it's not the same as hiring because we only have, it's me and Jess and one part-time person, but when we do our scholarship selection committee, I make sure that it's, and anyone can do this in any of their hiring, that it's a blind, that there's nothing that would indicate. Matter of fact, we try, unless there's, instead of a video teleconference, we'll do just a conference call, so that that's completely removed what someone looks like. You know, whether it's color or, you know, braids or tattoos or whatever it is, so that we, you know, we try really hard to take some of that bias out, and just in who gets the scholarships when we have funds for to offer scholarships. But and anyone can do things like that too.
And that's awesome. I mean, and some of it, guys, I mean, I know this is a heavy discussion. Some of it is it's not that complicated. It doesn't have to be major decisions. It just can be small decisions where you decide you're going to mentor, you know, a young Black girl or a young Black boy. You know, acknowledging that white privilege is a real thing, and acknowledging the fact that, you know, maybe I can get this done, you know, but maybe Tina can't, you know, and I know that I can go talk to my CEO because they're going to listen to me more than they're going to listen to Tina. You know, it could be small things. You know, when we talk about, I think about my young self, and, you know, being the first in my family to, you know, graduate high school or graduate college, you know, oftentimes we as Black people bear the burden of our entire families, right? We have to help them, you know, and so when we talk about like pay equity, you know, it's not about me. It's also too about, you know, my family. Just as many others, you know, I know in the Hispanic culture, you know, many Cubans come over and they actually send money back to their families, and we all do it. You know, we all help our families. And maybe it's, you know, looking at Tina or someone in your organization and exercising your white privilege and having conversation and discovering people on a personal level. And if there are opportunities that you have that you know that a Black person may not be afforded, offer it to them, you know? I think about my good friend, one of my good friends, who said to me, hey, Tina, you know, why don't you, you know, I've done pretty well for myself, but again, you know, I definitely am I'm in a position of leadership, and I do still help my family, and, you know, I'm trying to be a great example for my kids. But it was so refreshing for my white friend to call me up and say, hey, Tina, you know, I have a second house in the Keys. Whenever you and your husband want to go there, just let me know. All I ask that you do is give the housekeeper, you know, $150. And I'm like, wow, you know, that's amazing. You know, or, hey, Tina, if you need so-and-so, you know, I can make a call for you. Oftentimes, you know, Black people don't have that. They don't have those networks, especially if they've grown up in urban communities. You know, I work in a nonprofit, and I can tell you that, you know, many of our students, they had never gone to the beach before. You know, they had never gone to see a live play. And it's those things that if you have the power to expose, or if you have the resources to expose, you can change. You can help make a difference in the lives of Blacks. You know, use your resources, use your power. It doesn't have to be major, you know, and I can't express it enough, but it starts with a conversation. It starts with expanding your circles. It starts with befriending, you know, Blacks to really understand them in a different way. Some of what's perceived is not a reality, it's just culture. And a lot of people haven't dug into that culture to understand enough why they see what they see oftentimes. And again, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. This is not an easy conversation for me. It's not easy talking about my kids. It's not easy talking about my husband. But what I do know is that from where I sit, I want to be a catalyst for change. And I want to help people understand us. And I want to use my position of leadership to influence in a major way. And my expectation is that you guys would join me. That's all I have.
Tina, I just wanted to say how much your story touched me about your son and his friend Xavier and your husband coming home. But I also want to thank you, and I just want to point out, when you were talking about seeing a Black boy or a Black man or a Black person pulled over by a white cop, how the body language, I was just watching everybody, people were not comfortable with that. And I want to tell you, I have a 20-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter, and we've had a lot of conversations with my husband around our dinner table about George Floyd, Breonna, everybody, all the different situations, including the recent one in Atlanta. And, you know, I talked to my kids, if you see something like this happening, what do you do? And we talked about, you have to stop and call the police on the police if you have to. If there's more people with you, what would you do if that was your sister on the ground and somebody was doing that to your sister? And so I think, you know, when you said, but what we didn't think to talk about was what you said, which is just driving by and it looks okay, but stopping. You don't have to get out of your car if you're not comfortable, but stop and be there for that person. I think that is so important. So I just wanted to thank you for giving me something additional to share with our family. And I am fortunate because both of my children spend a lot of time and have a strong mentor in Jermaine Smith-Baugh, who's the Urban League CEO here in Broward County. They spend a lot of time at the Urban League. We have, anyway, I won't go on and on, but the other thing I would just say to any parents is, don't just talk, like take action. Find ways to expand your kids' circle too. Expand your friends' circle and expand your children's circle so that they are anti-racist and they are the legacy that you're leaving for the future.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that.
And I know Karen Lithgow wanted to make a comment. Karen, where are you?
I'm here. Hey, Tina, I want to thank you so much for all of your examples. I actually want to get to a story to share, but I want to just make a couple of personal comments, which is that you've just given me the courage. My father was Black Dominican. The way the gene pool came out, you may or may not see me, you may see me in a million different ways. My son, however, is African American. His dad is African American, my ex. And he's 12. And this has all been extremely hard for him. But because I'm beige, he hasn't wanted to have the talk with me. And he's in middle school and, it's a very tough time. And I've backed off because it's been very hard to figure out, but you've just pushed me because I have to be uncomfortable. I have to push myself to have these conversations. And even though he doesn't want to hear it from me, well, it's, we're going to have to figure this out. So I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing these very personal stories because you've really helped me personally. The story I want to share, though, that I think is about unconscious bias that may be interesting for folks here is it happened 20 years ago, but it comes forward today, which is that when I used to work for Disney, and I worked there during the time of the OJ trials. And my very, very close friend, he was like one of the few African Americans in the Miami office. When the verdict came out, and everybody probably, if folks remember, in many corporate boardrooms, kind of waiting and hearing. And when it came out, and his reaction, all eyes were on him, right? And people were just amazed that, he was like, yes, because this is a Yale undergrad, Harvard Business School, incredibly brilliant person. And what people didn't realize is that he didn't care so much about OJ, but it was about the racism that the LAPD department was exposed during that time. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because in the past couple of days we've been texting, and I want to just kind of, because we had a Disney reunion a few weeks ago, and the head of the region, one of the heads of the region, said, God, what happened to him? And he's a CEO now of a nonprofit doing amazing things. And so the head of the region said, I'll never forget his reaction during the OJ trials. He was such a smart guy, but I couldn't believe his reaction. And when I shared that with him, he said, you know, think about, I'm reading now, think about how that could have influenced my trajectory at Disney. If other senior folks asked him a few years later when I was up for a big promo, and he says to another white exec, one thing I'm not sure about is his judgment. And, you know, he goes on about that, but it goes forward, you know, I mean, like your unconscious bias and your impressions. And I think people, you know, we have to just check ourselves because, you know, something as innocuous as watching his reaction during a trial 20 years ago could have certainly influenced and would have, you know, his, as a Black man, his reputation and the way people perceived him. And so I think it's something that's so deep, and, you know, all of us just need to always just check ourselves, because we could say, no, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not, you know, this or that, or I may have some, but this is something that the head of the region, who's a wonderful person, we all love him, even John does, just happened to make that one comment. So I just share that because I think that that's something that, you know, is very real and can be very apparent in our corporate worlds as well.
Thank you, Karen, for sharing.
Sure thing.
Sue?
Tina, thank you so much for sharing your story and for this conversation. I mean, it's very telling, and I'm very troubled about what's going on in the world today. But I also know, I've been in the employment field for many, many, many years through a lot of different things, both in New York and here in Florida for the last 30 years. And I know that there is a bias, but there's also a bias when we talk about inequity with not only Blacks, but women in general. I mean, we all know that. And Maureen has done a very great job in having a program a couple of years ago for TCI and covered the stats and the data on that. But you made a comment that I just picked up on when you were saying that you're gratified that you had a job and you couldn't ask for anything more and you felt like you couldn't confront anybody. What would it take for you to have the confidence, or for anybody to have the confidence to stand up and say that I deserve more? Because we're in Strategies for Success, which I'm on the committee now, that's one of the things that we teach women in that program, Black or white or green or orange, that you must have the confidence. How can we, all of us together, how can we help you get that confidence? I left my house when I was 16 years old, and I didn't get any support from my parents. So, you know, and at some point you just have to just go for it. I don't know, maybe I'm different than most, but I mean, I lied
Sue?
about so I would get a job, and, you know, I did whatever I needed to do to get where I wanted to go. So I guess that's my challenge at this point, is how can we stop thinking about, you know, how we can change the white people, but how can we also help change the Black people mentality?
Sue, I haven't seen data on this about men, Black or white, but I have seen a lot of data that indicate that women are generally much more reluctant to ask for more.
That is true.
Have you seen any data on men, Black or white?
Well, Bob, the data is that the men, they don't need to have 100% behind them when they go for something. The women do. That is the big difference.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Not comfortable, you know, going for it unless they are 100% or 110% sure of what they're doing, which isn't necessary.
Yeah. Thank you.
There is data that show that women, and Black women in particular, are more likely to be punished or suffer negative recourse for pushing for more money or a better title or things like that. And I don't mean, you know, necessarily clear lash out quid pro quo
No, but
punishment, but
yeah.
they are likely to suffer from negative perception.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised if the same data applies to Black men.
I was going to ask about black men.
Yeah.
I haven't seen data on it.
I don't know. I mean, in my particular research was related to women, so I haven't seen that, but it would make sense, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
So I think
Tina,
it does mean we need to change the white people's reception more than we probably need to change Black people's or women's ability to act.
well, or both, you know. No harm in being assertive, having that uncomfortable conversation.
So Sue, I want to respond because, you know, part of your question is, you know, how can you help Black people feel more comfortable, or what made me feel less comfortable, if you will, with, you know, asking for more. When you come from, you know, a family of poverty, okay, I think it's just a part of your mental psyche that, you know, when you do something that your family members never did before, you automatically are so grateful. You know, growing up, I believe that I had a lot of, I had some confidence issues, you know, because my mom never instilled in me that, you know, not that I just think that the struggle was there. And so, you know, she had to focus on, you know, raising a kid at 14, okay, taking care of her mom and dad who were sickly, and dealing with a lot of other family issues. She never, you know, she had a lot of issues that she just couldn't focus on these conversations that I think that we talk to our kids about now. Like, you are smart. You're more than capable of doing X, Y, Z. And so some of the conversations that I have with my kids now is that be confident, be bold. You know, you're worth this, you're worth that, and never settle for less. I didn't have those conversations growing up. You know, I grew up in a pretty impoverished neighborhood, and to make it out of that neighborhood was just like, wow, I made it, okay? To go into corporate white America where you barely saw white people in your whole entire life because you lived in this small community of Black people, to sit across the table from an older white man or an older white woman and say, oh no, I'm not taking $10 an hour. I'm taking, I'm worth 15, and jeopardize or think that I'm jeopardizing my opportunity for getting employment because I know that I need employment. That makes me uncomfortable, right? That makes a lot of Black people uncomfortable. Your job is, because there are many of Tina Browns that's entering the workforce right now, your job is to pay Tina Brown based on her skill sets, her degree. I shouldn't have to fight for it. You know what the pay scales are. You know what the job requires. Don't make me fight. Just do the right thing.
Thank you, Tina, and thank you, Bruce. We're just a little bit over 10. If anyone would like to, and I know a lot of people scheduled only to 10 when we end our TCI talks, but if anyone would like to, if you have a few extra minutes, if people would like to stay on, if there's any additional questions, we would do so, if that works for you, Tina.
No, that's totally fine.
Because we understand some people need to jump off. But.
Yeah, no, this is fine. I can put my name, my email address, and phone number in the chat. I am more than open, willing to talk to any of you, to continue the conversation, to have a part 2, if that's what you want to do, Lori. At some point, I am open. I am appreciative that you guys were willing to be vulnerable, to share, to listen, to understand. I know that it is going to be us who makes the difference. So let me just put my name and I'll put my cell number in the chat. And of course, if you don't get it, you can always reach out to Lori or Jessica, and they can give you my information. I do work for a nonprofit, and if ever you want to, Sue, come and do a session with young people on being bold and fighting for what you believe in, I would welcome that, because I feel like that is important. I can't get to all 1,000 of our kids, but I would love to have you guys come and share, because there are a lot of Black kids growing up in Overtown, like I grew up in Overtown, who need that support, that encouragement, and that motivation.
Thank you so much, Tina.
I would be thrilled to do that, Tina. I would be happy to do a session.
I would love, you know, now we're operating in a virtual world, we can do something virtually, or I'm hoping that we can all come back online face to face in the fall. So I will follow up with you.
Okay. I look forward to it.
And thank you for starting us, jump-starting these conversations for us. And again, this is the start. And I do encourage everyone, I'm including Team TCI and the 21-day challenge. I've got my church doing it. You know,
awesome.
Just the little steps, the beginning steps to start someplace versus, and this is why we wanted to have this conversation, to start someplace. I mean, it's overwhelming to think about what we all need to do, but if you break it down and start with the small steps, they lead to big steps. And I'm sorry, men, but I have to say that, you know, we know women have the power to create real change.
We do.
And we want you along the way with us as we create this change as our allies. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, Bruce.
Tina, first of all, I'd like to think I'm marching arm in arm with the women.
We have to have one message. You'll notice that the conversation continues to go off in different directions because we all have issues. We all have things we're concerned about. It is, as Tina has said repeatedly, an uncomfortable conversation. And one of the ways that people deal with uncomfortable conversations is to not deal with them, is to go, well, but this happened to me. Well, but that happened to me. And we have to stop that. We have to focus. And if the point is that we are focusing on the way Blacks are treated by institutions, by government, by companies, and by people who don't look like them, then that's the focus. And it's too easy to run off and do something else. It's too easy to be distracted. And worse, it's too easy to let the people who need to hear the message be distracted. What I loved about what Tina said and what she did was she kept reminding us we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because it makes all of us uncomfortable on some level.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be comfortable being comfortable.
And the conversations need to keep going on, and we can't stop. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Let's keep these conversations going. Let's make real change. Thank you, everyone. Bye.